This story contains adult language and themes, including but not limited to violence, murder, sexual assault, self-harm, and suicide. Discretion is advised. Welcome to Hell. This is The Hidden Mountain, Episode 1. Before the shock of thunder shook the faded blue sky, it had been an otherwise normal day in hell. The damned, such as they were, went about their afterlives with the same self-interested malaise they had dragged with them all through their living years. Upon arriving in hell and discovering that there were in fact no flame-spewing demons to torment them nor any lake of fire to boil them, many souls quickly became quite bored of eternity, and now shuffled here and there looking for anything that might make them feel alive again, if only for a moment. When the thunderclap arrived, Alex Parsons had her face buried in yet another ancient folio, but the sound snapped her mind right back to London, 1944. Fear reached in and grabbed her guts, straightening her spine with a squeeze before she remembered that she was dead, and no longer needed to fret about silly things like Nazi bombing raids. "Did anyone else here?" she started to ask her fellow librarians, but none of the other wizened heads had bothered to look up from their glossy magazines. Alex feared for a moment that she was losing her mind. As far as she knew, there had never been weather of any kind in hell. So complete was the stasis that the sun itself never moved from its position in the middle of the sky, and she couldn't recall ever seeing so much as a cloud obscure it for even a moment. But why did no one else seem to notice? She convinced herself that it was merely a traumatic memory bubbling up, and so turned her attention back to her work. She was getting close to something big. She could feel it. She stared at the ancient reed paper scroll she'd been trying to translate, hoping it would suddenly reveal itself to her, but its meaning remained obscure. She was certain that it was a map of some kind, though she was having no luck deciphering the landmarks it seemed to indicate. The starting point appeared to be a fallen obelisk of some sort. The expert rendering showed a column, half submerged in sand, with strange writing on the side that was hidden by the undulating dunes. She could only make out the tops of what she assumed were letters, but their strange shape looked entirely unfamiliar to her. Sadly, this was the closest she had come to understanding anything on the map, but she felt confident that if she could just figure out where to begin, the way forward would emerge and lead her to the lost mountain of Nergama. There, if ancient rumors were to be believed, she could find the road that led out of hell itself. She wasn't even sure if she believed that, but it was better than festering here for the rest of eternity, or wasting her time reading old copies of Playboys like her moldy co-workers. She had scoured every folio and scroll that she could unearth, but there was no mention of a monument like the one shown on the page. It was thicker than an obelisk and rounded on one edge, though she wondered if it had been carved that way or shaped by the sharp desert winds. Perhaps it was a stele like the Rosetta Stone and had simply toppled over like the Tower of Babel itself. She shuddered to think that it had sunk beneath the sands forever, and as she pondered what that might mean for her potential escape, an earthquake wobbled the bowels of all creation. Alex felt the solid floor beneath her feet liquefy and quiver as the walls went weak in the knees and seemed to bend inwards. Red dust shook free from every crevice and drifted in the light rays that shone through the skillion roof, giving the entire terrifying scene a nice warm glow. Without a thought, Alex dashed up the grand granite staircase that led to the street from the library's main atrium. She feared nothing so much as being buried under a collapsed building, and the soaring stone ceiling of the library, which had always been tilted, now seemed in actual danger of falling down, entombing her in the rubble forever. She pushed with all of her strength against the heavy wooden doors and burst into the bright day outside, heaving with relief. Alex gazed upward, half expecting to see Nazi warplanes, but there was nothing in the sky, and the tremors were already dissipating. What few pedestrians there were in the old town seemed entirely unbothered by the quake and were already back to thinking about themselves. In vain, Alex looked to the sky for a clue, out of habit more than anything, but there was nothing to see. To her left, the massive ruins of the Tower Babel still struggled to reach their former glory, the jagged top telling the story of its tumble eons ago. It still reached higher than she thought should be possible, but nowhere near its former stature. Halfway down it, some long ago lunatic had placed a gargantuan mechanical clock. For centuries it had ticked, second after second, hour upon hour, while the sun itself refused to move. Hell was a single disappointing day that lasted forever, where time didn't budge. She noticed that the second hand had stopped. Curious, she stared at the clock, hoping it might reveal something to her that would make her feel better, but no, after a few seconds, it began ticking forward again. Somehow Alex was disappointed. Even Nazi bombers would be a break from the monotony of hell. She closed her eyes and listened to the air, straining to hear the retreating roar of plane engines or another peal of thunder, but there was nothing. The skies were silent, and the breeze still smelled vaguely of burning insects, like it always did. After a while, she simply sighed and headed back inside to her studies when something on the ground caught her eye. There, lying half drowned in the sands, was the image she had just been staring at in the ancient scroll. It was as though someone had seen through her eyes and drawn it exactly this way thousands of years ago. Half of her brain struggled to understand how that was even possible, while the other half began the task of comprehension. So it wasn't a massive, collapsed monument, nor any structure of notable size, she determined. Perhaps it was a model of such a thing. But the image was precisely this, down to the shape of the inscription on its side. As she bent to grab it, she realized that it was a writing instrument of some kind. It even held a top, much like the fountain pens she knew. One end was a dull gray, and the other a shiny black cap that reflected the sun. A thrill hummed inside her mind as she realized that she was about to reveal the rest of the letters and hopefully be able to translate them somehow. She plucked it from the ground and turned it in her fingers so she could finally see the curvy writing on the side. Was that an S? H-A-R-P-I-E? Her brow wrinkled in confusion. Sharpie?
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Hidden Mountain. Follow us for new episodes or visit findthehiddenmountain.com for more information.